Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I made a video and there are a few reasons for that, but the most important one is that I just wasn't feeling like it, to be honest. I just couldn't be asked. I was doing other things. But now I'm thinking, I wanted to talk about something. And the topic of today's video is going to be anxiety, my experience of anxiety, and I have plenty. If there's one thing I'm qualified to talk about, not professionally obviously, but experientially, it's anxiety. So before we jump into that topic, I don't know if you noticed my Liverpool shirt. So that doesn't mean that if you are a Man United fan, you shouldn't watch this video. I mean, that's okay. You're all welcome. Even Man United fans. I mean, Man United fans are people too, right? Okay, so, all right. So, anxiety, my first experience of anxiety happened to me when I was 19 years old. I was 19 or 20 years old. I was at the university and I just got plunged into a very, very dark period in my life. That's probably the most challenging period that I had to deal with so far. And when I say anxiety, I don't mean anxiety about certain things. Like all of us experience anxiety at one point of our lives. Some people are anxious about speaking publicly, some people are anxious about asking someone on a date, and so on and so on. What I'm talking about is living in a state of anxiety for pretty much all the time, 24/7. And that's the kind of state that I was in back then. So how did it start? There was some traumatic event in my life. Specifically, I nearly got kicked out of the university for getting involved in a fight. So that really had a really bad impact on me and my family. But of course, I can only speak from my own experience. Now, luckily, I got reinstated, or rather, I didn't really get kicked out in the end because, some intervening events, doesn't matter. But the important thing is that experience of really strong stress, it left its imprint on me in my body, and at the time I wasn't aware of that. So for a while I was okay. I think it was around a month or two that I was doing fine. I was actually feeling pretty good. But then one day I started feeling dizzy, and that's when the whole thing kicked off. So I, for some reason, got convinced that I have some really bad disease, like incurable disease, probably brain cancer. There was no evidence whatsoever for that, but I started looking for signs. I remember seeing some weird marks, like that look like scratches on my arm, even though I didn't scratch it. And somehow my mind has put these things, my dizziness, it put it together as me having some incurable disease. Now, I've heard other people having a similar experience, um, and it's weird. I mean, it's like there is no evidence for it, but you can't help but think that you're going to die soon. So what followed after that was a period of about 9 months, and I was at the university. It was the second year of my university, and things were going great in my life. I had a girlfriend. I was doing well in my studies, but then this thing just I don't remember much of that year. of what happened to me. I just remember not not wanting to do anything, so I think the depression was part of it as well. I was just so lazy. I would wake up at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and for me that's really late. um, so my university was starting at around 1 p.m, so I would wake up at 11. I didn't want to go anywhere, see anyone. I would just sit on my once I got back from the university, I would just sit on my couch, watch TV all day. And I wasn't sure what was happening to me. I was hoping that I would get better, but I wasn't getting better. I was feeling dizzy. That feeling wasn't going away, and that really was the main reason why I was convinced that I had cancer. It was because I was dizzy. I wasn't stable. Not very unstable, but I could feel it. And that feeling was scary. So I went to the doctor. I took some tests, but of course, uh, the country that I come from, especially back then, people didn't really know about these things like mental health, psychosomatic kind of stuff. Not many people know about that, even doctors. So my doctor gave me some tests, gave me some medicine, and yeah, said that I'll get better. But I wasn't getting better. So yeah, this lasted for a while, and then uh, in the summer, which was about 6 7 months after it kicked off, it really got worse because not only I was dizzy all the time, but I also started getting uh, I would feel like the shortness of breath, and I would feel pressure in my chest, and that was really, I wouldn't say scary, but it was really annoying, and I didn't understand what was going on with me. Um, so then, at some point, I think I started realizing, because it's been going on for a while, and once it goes on for a while, what started happening is I no longer believed that I was going to die, because I did all the tests and I knew that physically there was nothing wrong with me. But I was still feeling these weird feelings, the dizziness and the shortness of breath. So I wasn't sure. But then so because I knew that I wasn't going to die. The next thing that came up that made me upset was that, okay, maybe I will not die from this, but I will always feel like this. I will always feel like shit, basically. And that was the next thing that drove my anxiety. So then at some point, I started realizing that uh, if I don't react in any way to one of my attacks, the anxiety attack, they weren't quite panic attacks. They were just, stable, sometimes intensifying, like the shortness of breath thing. And I realized that if I don't do anything, it will just go away, you know. And that was the turning point in in the healing, because after that, I started believing that I could get better. And once I started believing, within a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, it would hit me, and I just wouldn't react. I wouldn't get scared. I would just, stay mindful. And I didn't know mindful back then, but I just knew that I don't have to react and it will pass away. And it did. And within a couple of months, this thing was actually gone, which was also very surprising. It just went the way it came. So I wasn't sure what to make of it. I just carried on living like normal. And then 2 years passed, was great. I would get an episode here and there, but it wasn't constant anymore. So that was great. I thought I was cured. But then 2 years later, when I went to study for my master's, I came to the UK. That's when it hit again, because I got stressed, and because everything was new for me, new environment, new country, new system of education. I had to work very hard. I had to work harder here than I ever worked before in my life in terms of studying. So this thing kicked off again, and it lasted for another 9 months, a year roughly. And what is amazing is that despite all that, despite of me constantly being anxious and even depressed, I would say, second phase definitely there was depression. I managed to do really well at my university. That is still astonishing to me how I did that. Maybe because I was so worried that I was gonna fail, it sort of incentivized me to work hard, and so I did. But anyway, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that having anxiety and depression doesn't always mean that you can't do anything or that you will suck at everything. In my experience, that's not the case. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. You can still be active, and people around you may not even recognize that you are going through that stuff. In fact, there was no one around me who knew back then that I was struggling with these things. So, because I had some experience from my first episode 2 years before, I tried to take it easy, not to react too much. But it was hard because I was busy all the time. I didn't have time for myself, so it wasn't that simple. But then another turning point happened in my life, and that was when, for the first time in my life, I read a self-help book. And this self-help book was specifically about anxiety, specifically about my condition. It wasn't a very good self-help book, to be honest. Now, with the hindsight, I can say that it was actually in Russian. Wasn't particularly great, but it was the first book that I read, first time that I sort of realized that I'm not crazy, and that there are people out there who are experiencing similar things, And there was some advice in the book and stuff, but I didn't practice that much. I didn't do much about it. But just the recognition that there are other people out there experiencing similar things was very helpful to me. So from that moment on, I started healing again. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't overnight. I think it took me another 2 or 3 months to heal. And then I finished my studies. Of course, that also helped. I wasn't under such an intense stress anymore. So, yeah, and then it went away. So it did come back afterwards for a couple of times, but it wasn't that long, that prolonged, or that intense. And then finally, I got to the stage where whenever the symptoms came back, such as whenever I felt dizzy or when I have shortness of breath, even now, like those specific things that made me feel very bad in the beginning, or there were others too. I would experience pain in my abdomen, my lower abdomen, sometimes upper abdomen, that unexplainable. I don't know what it was. I did all the checks and they came back clean. So all these things were scary to me back then. But then over time, I started recognizing them as just passing phenomena. It came and it went away. And the moment I fully learned to do that, these symptoms don't come back. I mean, they rarely come back. They would come back now and last maybe for a day, maybe half a day, and then go away. Why? Because I don't give them my attention anymore, right? And this is key. This is what I didn't understand back then, but I understand much better now, is I was resisting all the time. That's why it stayed in my body for such a long time. So there was an initial shock to my system, which was the event that happened at the university, and it left its imprint on my body, right? It didn't go away completely. Then sometime after that, it started coming up. And that's one thing about stressful events, because in the moment you are stressed, your body will not react like that because it needs to mobilize its resources. I guess that's what happened with me, to deal with that stress. But once the stress subsides, then all the shit that got accumulated there start to come up, and then you have to deal with it. So I wasn't dealing with it properly. I didn't know how. I had no idea. No one. I saw a doctor. Doctor never told me you need to be, you need to be patient, you need to be mindful or whatever. I didn't know any of these others. They just gave me some pills, and they didn't help much. They didn't do anything. So now I understand that it was my resistance that was keeping those symptoms in place, because every time the symptoms kicked in, which was almost every day, I would get very tense straight away, and that would, just keep the energy stuck there. The energy wouldn't be flowing. And because of that, it stayed for so long. Whereas now, if it kicks in, I would just recognize it, don't worry about it, just go on about my life, doing normal things, and after a while, it goes away. Okay, so this goes back to the thing we discussed in the very first video about resistance. So with anxiety, it's exactly the same thing. The anxiety is trauma, the stress that is stuck in your body, and it can be a recent trauma or it can be a trauma from childhood, but it's something that's lodged in your body. And if you are experiencing further stress, if you are getting strained when it reminds about itself, then it's gonna keep stuck. So one way of dealing with it is recognize it for what it is. Anxiety of any kind, whether that's public speaking or meeting someone for the first time, recognize it for what it is and try not to change it. Try to accept that this is what it is, but at the same time, don't give it too much attention. So it's a delicate balance that you need to find here, that I am still working on that myself. It's about recognizing it, but once you recognize, not give too much attention to it. Maybe put some attention to your body, to your legs, to your arms, and I'll do a separate session on mindfulness, on how to be aware of different parts of your body, or go and do something. Read a book or go for a walk, but you recognize that it's still there, but you're not fighting it. You're not trying to subconsciously dislodge it and push it away, and that's a big challenge here. So that's what I think with anxiety. That's one way of dealing with it. So another thing, as I mentioned, let's go back to this briefly. I read a book, a self-help book. I was about anxiety specifically, and that helped me a lot. So in that from that perspective, I would say maybe learning about other people's experience with anxiety is also very helpful. Obviously speaking to a counselor or a therapist, that is also very helpful. But anything that takes you out of isolation, anything that stops you thinking that you are alone in this, anything will help. So I highly recommend doing that. Now, one final point, and this is a very important point, that it's a lesson that I learned from this experience, and that is that there is a very intimate relationship between your mind and your body. Because when I just started experiencing this anxiety, if someone told me that it's your mind that keeps you stuck, I would have laughed it off, because back then there was no way I would have accepted such a claim that my mind affects my body. No way. There is my mind and there is my body. They are pretty much independent. But what this taught me is that it is absolutely not the case, that the mind and the body are very closely connected, because your mind dictates how you behave in every given moment. You may not notice that, but when you are thinking negative thoughts, like anxious thoughts, your body is restricting itself. You are getting tense everywhere, and this restricts the flow of energy that needs to flow. It needs to exhaust itself for you to feel better. And when you are thinking anxious thoughts, you are actually getting tense. So this is where the mindfulness comes in. Again, I'll talk about it in another video. But yeah, so that's my experience with anxiety. I'm not free of anxiety, of course. I mean, I get anxious all the time, but anxiety I'm getting now is I know why I'm getting it. You know, there's an event that I need to do something or see someone, and I would get anxious because of that. But it's not 24/7 like it was back then. You know, so in that sense, it's a massive improvement, and I keep working on it even now. Yeah. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. If you found this video useful, that's great. And can I please ask you to subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and I'll be in touch soon with more videos, with more material on mental health and different emotions and states and how to deal with those. Okay, bye bye.